Thank you for listening to the Kyle and Tim podcast, where we have authentic conversations that help cultivate a better understanding of ourselves, our guests, and the world we live in. This podcast is about our guests, getting to know them, their backgrounds, experiences, thoughts, and ideas. We really appreciate you listening. Before we introduce our next guest, we'd like to introduce a few of our sponsors that help make this podcast possible.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Mountain Mule Transportation, located here in Bozeman, Montana. Mountain Mule is a private SUV and truck service, offering chauffeur services in all of southwest Montana. Whether it's your next skiing, hunting, or fishing trip, early morning or late night trips to and from Bozeman Airport, as well as weddings and private parties. No matter the occasion, Mountain Mule will get you there safely and on time. To learn more, visit mountain-mule.com and book today.
My name is Russell Lynch. I'm here on Kyle and Tim's podcast today. I'm super excited that I've been offered to do this. And
we talked about law enforcement.
Yeah, we talked about where you grew up.
Talked about where I grew up. We talked about, my early years, becoming the right material for the Marine Corps. We've talked about some of my time in the Marine Corps, the travels there. We've talked about law enforcement, which I truly love, both the Marine Corps and law enforcement. Can't imagine my life without either one of them. And we've talked about some important stuff like mental health crisis in the country and, kind of educated. Hopefully some people understand a little bit about how this narcotics trade works and different stuff like that.
Yeah, perfect. Enjoy, folks.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Russell. You were sheriff in Arkansas?
Nope, sheriff of South Carolina.
Okay.
When I got out of the Marine Corps, had been in the Marine Corps with a guy from Spartanburg, South Carolina. And I went back home to get into the Arkansas State Police is what I wanted to do. I was dragging along. My family had little connections there, and it was dragging on too long for me. And I made a phone call to South Carolina and went out and interviewed, got sworn in one day and went back and packed up, had a yard sale, moved back to South Carolina. I was there 36 years before moving here.
So what was Arkansas like before you?
Man, Arkansas is what made me who I am, man. I claim to be a product of South Arkansas. My grandparents on my mother's side had a small farm there, and that's where I learned to work, be tough. They had part of the family had a commercial tomato operation there. And, I remember, I was 10, 11 years old when I started picking tomatoes. And
Do you think you picked up your accent from there?
I got it probably come right there. A little mix of South Carolina in it. So you can tell?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, but that's where, that's South Arkansas. It was hot. It was hard work and made you tough. Hell, by the time I was 15 or 16 down there, I remember the little banner on a Budweiser can. Mm-hmm. There's a little banner right there. Hell, I had that memorized word for word. when I was probably 15 or 16, it was a rite of passage in that world. Done a little rodeo and had just for fun.
How many? Do you have siblings?
I do. I'm the oldest of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you running the tomato picking operations?
Hell no. I had a bunch of people running me, man. Back, and I swear I remember this. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but you get a couple of weeks when the tomatoes are starting to come to and you're starting to pick them. By that time, Johnson grass is knee high. Mm-hmm. And I remember, man, I was working with women. I was working with blacks, Mexicans. Yep. And at the time, at this time, man, I didn't know what was going on, but a little plane would fly over the Mexicans and duck down into Johnson grass. They were actually worried about
immigration.
They were actually worried about it then. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, Arkansas pretty close to that border anyway. South Arkansas is, mm-hmm. But
how big was that tomato farm?
They'd done about 18 to 20 acres
of
tomatoes, and they were picked every day except Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Mondays were hell because, you pick them what they call a star. It's a little pink star because all these things are graded and packed and sold. So on Mondays, you had a whole day. So, you'd go from here to that wall and get a bucket where you'd go twice that far on a regular day, but it's hard work, mm-hmm. But it makes you, not scared.
I guess what time of year are you picking?
Summer.
Summer.
Dead summer, man.
All
yeah.
Summer.
About all summer. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Till the vines die off and they start getting sun blistered and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. All summer. Hot, just humid, hot, just hard work,
Yeah. In that 20 acres, I would imagine, I guess they were ripe at different times in different spots of that on that 20
Yeah,
acres?
you had them, the ultimate thing, they graded them 1s, 2s, 3s, and culls. And, all your culls, you'd miss some, and the culls were red, and you'd pick them in, and then they'd sell those in the barn. It would turn into immediate juice or something like that. Your star pinks would ship and be red by the time they got to where they wasn't ripening them with like nitrogen and stuff like that. Now they're just pretty much picked green, and but they're picked and they're only turned green for a month. But these were all vine ripe tomatoes. A lot of work.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Yeah, we do that when we did sweet corn. We'd plant a couple rows, and then you wait a week, do another row. That way everything's not ready at once. Else you got five or 10 acres of sweet corn. And
you got to think though, man, when you look across 20 acres of tomatoes, hell, you can't even see the other 10. I mean, it's a lot of friggin' tomatoes.
How tall were those plants?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, 3 foot high, 4 foot high. There were a lot of snakes and turtles in there. It was interesting.
Yeah, I guess you can't be scared of snakes if you're going to be doing that.
No,
you're going to get used to it.
No, we rode, but we had a good time though, man. We worked hard, and we rode horses every afternoon. Rode horses every Sunday after church with guys, and rode buckouts. A lot of buckouts.
What's a buckout?
A buckout is a lot of these rodeo stock producers, and I'm talking about small scale as to what I was involved with. On Sundays, you could go to a buckout and you could ride all the bulls you wanted to for $5 a head. So it's practice.
Okay.
The buckout was practice.
That sounds like fun.
It's hilarious, man. Just it all stops when you get drinking too much beer and somebody gonna get hurt too bad. You had to cut it off, but it was a lot of fun.
Do you know where those tomatoes go? Were they local? They're going all over the country?
I would think they were going all over the country. Probably in the South. Mostly, but God, that part of Arkansas, hell, everybody down there was tomato farmers. A lot of tomato farmers in that part of Arkansas.
Still nowadays?
Yeah, say so, man. The growing environment down there is
great.
It's perfect for tomatoes and stuff. Yeah, a lot of humidity, a lot of heat.
Yeah,
but
and the season would be long there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Summers are long there. It's probably hotter than my grandpa would say. Probably hotter than Hades right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How'd you guys meet?
Tim, we met. I think Tim mentioned something to Nick.
I reached out to the Wilson just because I was doing for the Mountain Mule podcast, and he said, "This is the guy you want."
Yeah,
if you want somebody
to. Yeah. I just gave Nick hell a while ago. I was worked yesterday, and Nick says, "Man," he said, "You know what I'd like to have right now more than anything?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Man, a damn double cheeseburger from freaking McDonald's." And so coming here, when I got off the river and was coming in, I pulled in McDonald's and I got me a double cheeseburger. But I sent Nick a picture of it. He's like, "Fuck you,"
Nice.
Yeah, but I moved here going on my second year now.
Okay.
I was living in the Charleston area before I decided to move out here. But I've been coming to Montana for 35 years on elk hunts and antelope hunts, turkey hunts. There was more north of Billings around Roundup, Muscle Shell. There's some ranches up there. And in another life, I've won 5 national championships with turkey calls with the National Wild Turkey Federation. Well, that kind of opens doors for you.
Okay.
And, there's a deal in the country where there's 4 huntable subspecies of turkey. So you got out here, they're called Merriams. You have Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, some of the more southern western states that have what they call a Rio, and then most of the turkeys across the country are Easterns, and then way down South Florida you have Osceolas. Well, it got to be a big deal with these profound turkey hunters. They call it a grand slam. So if you kill each one of the subspecies, then that's considered a grand slam. Okay. So I'd met a guy, his name was Mike Murphy, lives in Red Lodge, still does, and met him at a trade show. We were doing 6 or 8 trade shows selling calls. We had, still have a company that makes calls. Ran out of Myrtle Beach, and ran into Mike, got to know him, and his cowboys out here were good elk, antelope, mule deer, whitetail guides.
Yep.
They didn't know shit about turkeys,
Yep.
you know. And I remember we bought a hunt from him. He had us out. We bought it. He gave us a good deal on the hunt, but he was trying to get his turkey business going. And I got out here, and I'll never forget, man. There was a dude named Chad. I forget Chad's last name. Chad was actually went through a big deal where him and another guy killed a wolf that had a collar on it or something. But anyway, they were, you know, Chad was a drunk, basically. He drank a lot, put it that way. And I remember meeting this dude. I forget where he's from, but he was a bow hunter, and he was a Pope and Young dude. And we got in the Suburban with him the next morning, and there was a bag, a Walmart bag in the front seat, and it had 6 or 8 different types of turkey calls. And I looked at that bag, ain't none of them been opened. He didn't. Okay. The whole inside of the Suburban smelled like rotten beer or alcohol. So he took us where these turkeys were, and I said, dude, I'll tell you what, why don't you sleep it off? I mean, this dude's going turkey hunting, you know. So we did, killed a couple of turkeys first thing, and then me and Mike just hit it off, and so I helped him build a turkey business.
You kind of taught him what you do.
Yeah, got him out here, got him going, let him see that there was people actually willing to pay for these things. Mm-hmm. They're kind of a nuisance in Montana in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. The Merriams are. But that's how I got started coming out. So I'd come out and work for him maybe a week or two. Okay. And then he'd swap me out for an antelope hunt or an elk hunt. Gotcha. You know, that's how I started coming out to Montana a long time ago.
Okay.
How old were you when you started turkey hunting?
I killed my first turkey probably when I was 13, 14 years old. All my life, basically. I remember first turkey I killed. I had chiseled out a turkey call, and I killed this turkey in the spring, and I was just excited as hell. And I had a single shot 16 gauge, and I killed this turkey, and I was just excited. I said 13, 14 years old. And I go to pick the thing up and look at it and everything. I pick it up and I start down this really rocky ridge, and the damn thing started flopping on me, and I dropped everything, man. Turkey gun, broke the stock on the shotgun. Yeah. So I'll never forget the first one. It was a lot of fun.
Who taught you how to hunt?
My dad was I come from a good family, middle class family, maybe lower middle class, something like that. My dad was a sports freak, but didn't hunt. But my mother, on my grandparents' side in South Arkansas, my 2 uncles, her 2 only brothers, they were the ones that they got me going. And then my mom, there'd be times she knew I wanted, and I lived there. But I was away from the farm. My mom used to take me. She'd after school, done whatever, and she'd take me up to this lake called Lake Maumelle, and she'd drop me off there and let me squirrel hunt, and she'd sit there and read a book and wait for me to get done, stuff like that. So
she just let you go roam.
Yep.
She probably wanted some peace and quiet.
She probably did. I'm gonna tell you, man, she probably did. Really, I'll be honest with you. I'm sure.
I think you still might be.
That might take. I still like to have a good time. I can tell you that, man. But I was a hellion. I was. Never. That was one of those things we always just say: as long as nobody gets hurt too bad, not too much property damage, then that's where you're at the threshold of having a good time. You know what I'm saying? But it was all part of growing up then.
Yeah.
Did you whitetail hunt or anything else there?
Oh God, yeah, I've killed tons of damn whitetail, bow and gun, and all over the country too. Really, all over the South, whitetails. I've had a family I've hunted with for years up in Indiana. Indiana produces some good whitetails, but I've killed a few good. The better deer I've killed been out of Indiana.
I don't see as many turkeys around here.
No, this part of the state really doesn't. Over here in the Gallatin Valley, if you take the river road over there, you'll see a few out there. Most of them are on Ted Turner's place. But I've got 2 ranches I've hunted with Mike for years. Yeah, I had a couple out last year to hunt, and we really got dumped on. They were here for 3 days, and it was like a blizzard up by Lewistown. That has got to be the windiest place in the world. Is up around Lewistown, Montana. It's freaking unbelievable. But I got a couple of guys. Well, the guy actually now that runs the game call company and his son are coming out towards the end of May to turkey hunt, but we'll be driving 6 hours.
Okay.
And that's crazy too, since I moved to Montana.
You're still in the same state.
Yeah. If you start out in Columbia, South Carolina, which is pretty much in the middle of the state, and you drove 6 hours in any direction except east because you're going to run into the water. Anywhere else, though, man, you'll be in 2 or 3 or 4 states, 6 hours. Mm-hmm. I don't think people realize how big.
When you look at it on a map and you look at Montana, it's a big state.
Oh, God, it's huge. I seen something the other day. It's like 15 hours to drive across Montana,
I guess
east to west, something like that.
From one side to the other, I guess. I don't know. I guess it would be. I mean, if I drive from here to Spokane, which is basically the border of Idaho, it's like 6. So let's call it 5.5. So it's 5.5 there.
And if you go to North Dakota, it's at least what, 4?
Yeah, so it's
5.
like 9.5.
Yeah.
10 across.
Yeah, people don't realize how.
And I guess if you did it, catty corner from end to end, it would be 13 or 14 or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. It's just a big state.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you drive south, right? If you head to Salt Lake, and you head that way, it's 3.5 hours before you hit Idaho.
Yeah,
and if you go south,
so it's big.
A buddy of ours, Clay, was saying he goes eastern Montana a lot, turkey hunt. And that's what you're saying.
Montana.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And East Montana too is where they got a good whitetail herd out there.
Okay.
Eastern along the Milk River and a lot of eastern Montana, and they've got some good elk out there. I got into one elk out there one year, was just a little raghorn bull, but that about freaked me out itself. That's the first elk I ever shot. The thing's 15 yards and bugles and it's slobbering at you, and I couldn't even hardly get the bow back. They were laughing like hell at me later.
You thought the thing was going to come trampling?
Yeah, I was talking shit. How many whitetails I've stuck with a bow, and then when it comes time to do the deal on this elk, hell, I couldn't hit. He apparently is telling me, draw the bow, and I'm apparently trying like hell, and finally got it back. But these elk are amazing animals.
Uh-huh.
They really are.
It's just the adrenaline, really.
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, and they're vocal.
Yeah.
Versus a deer. You know what I'm saying? That's what's so much fun about turkeys. It's like hunting hunting an elk's like hunting a 1,000-pound turkey. When they're in a rut and you can work them and call them, call them in. Me, I'll prey off those satellite bulls all day long, as long as they're coming up. But it's been a lot of fun. And I will say one of the best things is once I got here and established that residency, those $1,200 and $1,500 outfitter tags I was buying all my life, man, I hunted this year, dude. I'm over 62, and I hunted this year. I got an elk, deer tag, everything to go with it, and I was hunting for $32.
Yeah,
$32. I'll never get all my damn money back from Montana, all those,
right?
The non-resident tags I bought, but that was fun. That was fun to get, and I bought a $15 fishing license the other day.
Yeah,
so versus $120.
Well, let's go all the way back.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to when you were a little boy.
Yeah.
So born and raised in Arkansas, where?
I was raised in West Little Rock.
Okay.
West Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
And and I do claim to be a product of South Arkansas, but I mean, my parents were good parents. I had a good family, but I just loved the farm down there. So every year from the time I was about 10 years old up to my junior high in high school, I spent the summers on the farm.
And whose farm was it?
My grandparents, Holt and Mildred Hobbs. Man, I don't even know how to describe them. I mean, they're products. They made it through the Depression. And, my grandfather was, he was 34, 35. He had my oldest uncle, my mom, and my Aunt Judy. The middle child for them was born with polio.
Holy shit.
And at the time, they actually quarantined him. I mean, once they knew she had polio, they had her in a special ward at the hospital. They didn't see her for weeks.
Yeah.
And during that time, he had an option to go to either be drafted or he could have went to work for a bomb plant that was making bombs for World War II in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Well, he said he'd rather take his chances in the Pacific than he would in that bomb plant because the damn things was going off in Pine Bluff all the time, I guess, And so he goes.
He thought he was safe for going to war.
Yeah, he thought he was safe for going to war. And he was just a man's man kind of dude. I remember he was watching some Japanese prisoners build I guess you'd say it's a granite or a rock jetty there in Guam. And these prisoners were where he was sitting there with a rifle, I guess, watching them. And before I deployed the first time over to Okinawa, over to the Far East over there, was talking to him and didn't know I was going to Guam.
Yeah.
And he told me that story. I didn't hear it till after I got out of boot camp, and he was telling me about that jetty, and sure as hell, I found that.
You saw the jetty.
I saw the jetty.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But people don't realize here he's 30. He's in his early 30s, mid 30s.
He's an older man.
Yeah.
That's an older guy to go to war.
Yeah. Got 2 kids and one with polio just born. And, everybody's saddled
way
up.
different than being 20. or 19
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Well, and he was kind of known as grandpa kind of thing. Like I said, he was a rough dude. I remember he had this knife. We always knew it as a watermelon knife. And, we had a farm there, had watermelons all the time, and he had the watermelon knife. And, everybody knew where it was, and we'd go get the watermelon knife when we'd cut a watermelon. And when I got out of boot camp, that's a couple of years after I got out of boot camp. I'd done 8 years in the Marine Corps, but I was home one time, not long after boot camp and my infantry training, and he said, "Go get that watermelon knife." And I go get the knife, and when I pick it up, I immediately recognize it was a Marine Corps K-bar. And he said, "You recognize that?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Well, you can't have it now, but I stole it from a Marine. I'm going to give it back to a Marine." And I said, "How do you steal it from the man?" He goes, "Well, they'd picked up 3 or 4 Marines that had been separated from their unit. I sent them on an island. So they sent a skiff out, picked these guys up." And he said, they were malnourished. They had been out there with nothing for, days and days. They were in bad shape. And they bring them on the ship, and they feed them, give them a place to sleep and all. And I guess a week or so went by, and they had arranged to drop them off back at a unit. If it was theirs or not, I don't remember. But they were having one last meal. And he walks through the wind tunnel of the ship. He was on a minesweeper. And he walks through the tunnel of the ship, and these guys were in there eating, but all their haversacks were outside. And he looked down, and he seen the butt of that K-bar sticking out of that pack. And he said, "I looked around, I reached down and got that knife." And he said, "I stuck it down my Cracker Jacks and took it down to his berth, and dropped it off." And he goes, "Damn them boys," we all said bye to him. They got on the ship, and he said, I thought to myself, "Damn, that old boy may need that to kill a damn nip with." And here I done took it, and took it from him. So that K-bar has.
He just wanted it.
He just wanted that Marine. Yeah, he just wanted that Marine Corps knife, And then after he passed away, at his funeral, we were living in South Carolina. I mean, I've driven from South Carolina to Arkansas so many times. It's not even funny. And that knife was there. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. He wanted the Marine to have it back. So that's a pretty cool story. But that generation back then was really something remarkable.
Yeah.
During World War II, the Depression and all that goes with all that,
And then he's the one that started the farm there?
Yeah, he had it. Actually, it was going then when he had it.
Okay.
They already had it. We didn't have like cattle. Any cattle they had was for consumption. It wasn't, a cattle operation at all. Just a big, I guess you'd call them truck farms. Like just besides the tomatoes, just acres of corn and beans and everything, vegetables, fruits.
Is any of that still there, the farm or anything now?
No, one of my uncles ended up, it was all divided up, and one of the uncles bought all the other brothers and sisters out of it. Okay. It's still there. Yep. It's not operating. It's kind of sad to see now. Those old farmhouses just can't hardly see it now. It's grown up and stuff like that. It was a hell of a childhood down there to see it like that. But then, things change.
Yeah.
And then from there, man, I worked. I set up my junior year in high school, and then I went into, I was in shop and ended up working Russell Lynch construction. It's what I've pretty much done up until I went in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I was making good money, wild as hell. Went down, done some building down in South Texas, and then back up. And I was out of control, to be honest with you. I was kind of married at a young age. I married young, and I wasn't worth a shit as a husband. And, I remember we got divorced, me and my ex, she said, "Hell, well, I ain't going to deal with you. Somebody else deal with you," kind of thing. And so we really got divorced. I was living back in the same.
Because you were just independent.
I was off the reservation, man. I was damn, now don't get me wrong. I've always had good jobs, made good money, and I knew to do what I wanted to do, I had to show up. Anyway, we hadn't been divorced long. We were still going out on, date nights and stuff like that. We hadn't been divorced a month. I was begging her back, "Please, I'll straighten up." And we were at this place called Cajun's Wharf. It's a really pretty nice seafood place hanging over the Arkansas River in downtown Little Rock. And I was telling her the whole time, I said, "I'll do whatever, give me, I'll go see a counselor. I'll see a preacher." And we were mixed. I was Southern Baptist. She was Catholic, and there was that little thing going on. She goes, "Well, I thought of something you could do." And I said, "What's that?" She goes, "If you'll join the Marine Corps, I'll remarry you." And I was sitting there, hair halfway down my back, and I looked at her, I said, "Hell yeah, I'll do it." I'll do it Monday. And I said, what are you going to do? She goes, I'm going to join with you. And sure as hell, that next week, me and her went down and both of us joined the Marine Corps. Walked in a Marine Corps recruiting office, a guy named Ray Mathis. I guess everybody was out for lunch, and this guy named Ray Mathis was a staff sergeant sitting there. And me and her walk in the door, and he's got his feet propped up on the desk, and he goes, what can I help y'all with? I said, hell, me and her both want to join the Marine Corps. That's so much we get to get a 2-in-1 like that, you know, and that's how I ended up in the Marine Corps. That's how I ended up there.
And so you had to cut.
She remarried me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cut your hair.
Oh yeah. She remarried me, and she actually shipped out a couple of weeks before me. You know, the way it works, if you're in the Marine Corps, if you live on the east side of the Mississippi, you go to boot camp at Parris Island. If you live on the west side of the Mississippi, you go to San Diego. The only way you can go to Parris Island or opposite, if you want, if you had a family member, let's say that lived in Arizona, that went to Parris Island because maybe you lived there. So I was wavered in to go to Parris Island with her. And so we were both, of course, that's totally segregated in the Marine Corps. And she was on one side of the island because I think that they give you this stationery to write letters on. And it's Marine Corps stationery, the paper, the little pad, there's a little Earlsenia monument on the envelope. And I remember I was getting letters from her that said Private Lynch. It was to Private Lynch from Private Lynch. I think the drill instructors thought I lost my freaking mind. I think they think I was writing letters to myself. They didn't, these clowns on, you know, down there at all.
Right, because then they would, yeah.
And I remember one.
You don't want to give them any information.
No. And we were there one night and had a mail call. I remember reading her letter, and somewhere in her letter it said something about, hey, we got a cool way of buff shining, you know, boots. He said, you just take some pantyhose and, you know, get them shining and just buff them with these pantyhose. And I remember writing her letter back, and I got down, I remember all the shit about these pantyhose. And, you know, I wrote her back and said, yeah, that sounded like a good idea about the pantyhose. We're a little short on those on this side of the island over here, you know. And, God, it was 2 or 3 days later because if you, it was like, I don't know, a slow way of email because it was right there, you know. Right. And I remember if they felt anything in your mail, you had to open it in front of them. Yeah. We had mail call, and God, I remember Lynch, you know, and I go running up there, and dude, he handed me this envelope and said, oh, man, you know, and I felt it, and I knew exactly what it was.
Because you asked her for it.
Those knee-high pantyhose, you know, they just pull up. That's what it was. It's like, felt like a big rubber, you know what I'm saying? And I opened them up, and they went nuts on me, right? So he said, one of the drill instructors, whichever one it was, I'll tell you, what do you think about robbing banks? You know, because you see. Okay. And from then on, I was their entertainment and their bank robber the whole way through freaking boot camp. If they hollered bank robber up, I had to run up. I was expected to have them freaking pantyhose in my pocket, and I had to pull them over my head and let all the drill instructor buddies freaking laugh at it for a while, you know. But, you know, it is what it is. I remember it. It meant something, right? Yeah. I still remember to this day. But, yeah, that was a unique time to have both of us down there. Then they knew. Yeah, right. You know, then they knew, and life was double hell. I was a bank robber, and I got my wife down there. Right. You know, so.
How old were you when you enlisted?
I was a little older. I was 20. Okay. So when I went in boot camp, I was older than most.
How long did she stay in for?
She stayed in when she got out of boot camp. Their boot camp was 8 weeks. Ours was 12. She got out and went to Camp Lejeune for her training. She come back down for my graduation. And when I went up for infantry school, you know, we'd been together 4 or 5 years before that. So we were really kind of ready to have kids. And at the time, if a female got pregnant, all she had to do was say she wanted out, and you know, they could let her out if they're pregnant. Right. And she said, you know what? I think we should go ahead and start having some kids, and I'll get out. She's out, and my oldest son, his name is Mitch, and Mitch, I guess Mitch is 41. He is a senior process engineer with Salesforce now. Very successful dude. All of his accounts are overseas. But when he was born, we were fixing to deploy. And they were really trying to find a way to hold me back just to let her have the baby. But she had the baby, she had Mitch, and I deployed about 5-6 days later and was gone for about 8 months. And then my daughter was born. I deployed there with the 6th Marine. I was with the 6th Marines for a number of years. And then my daughter was born at the Naval Hospital in Charleston. It's kind of how I ended up down there. I was on nuclear duty at a nuclear storage facility outside of Charleston for a couple of years.
And where did you deploy?
I've been deployed to the Far East, which includes, Japan, Thailand, all that part of the country. Been to Hawaii. Most of my time in the early 80s, there was a big presence in the military, including especially the Marine Corps in Central America during the Cold War. So I spent a lot of time in Panama, spent some time in Honduras and that area around Honduras, Guatemala, all in that part.
What did you like what was your favorite place?
Oh, God, I think I really think my favorite place was the Far East. I've been to, when we deployed to Okinawa, we were primarily based there, but then you're on ships doing a lot of stuff and spent a lot of time in Korea, South Korea. And then one of the coolest things I've ever done, our battalion commander at the time in the 6th Marines was a guy named Wes Fox. And Wesley Fox he was a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander. And he was a Medal of Honor recipient out of Battle of Dewey Canyon in Vietnam. Super phenomenal human being. I mean, just this guy, just leadership dripping off of him, And he, being a Medal of Honor recipient, he had a lot of leeway with where he went, how they deployed and training. And we ended up on the island of Tinian. And Tinian is part of the Mariana Islands. It's next to Saipan, Guam, that part of the Pacific there. But Tinian in particular is where the Enola Gay and the other plane that left to go drop the bombs in Japan. So, all that's just coral islands, and these Japanese had made these just nice runways. They're just, I don't know how they do it with explosives or whatever, but that stuff was sheared off and wasn't no pavement or nothing. Didn't have to be. They were landing these planes on coral. And I remember there was this like a cul-de-sac, huge cul-de-sac at the end of this runway. And in the middle of that cul-de-sac, there was a pit, but the pit had been covered up. But this pit had an olive tree planted in it. And there was a stone marker with a bronze plate on it that told you what it was. But where we were standing right there at that pit, they brought those atomic bombs in and they drop them down in that pit and pull the plane around it, put the plane over it, and then belly that bomb, put that bomb up into the belly of the plane. And when you look out that runway, the island of Saipan, all those were big battles, in World War II, but you're looking at Saipan, if you just keep going straight off that runway is Japan. And there was 550, 600 Marines in a rifle battalion. And when you're there and you realize what's going on, you look at it, you'll never hear that many Marines silent, unless they're really in a situation. It was kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? To sit there and look at that tree and understand what was going on. And it was, and there were on the island of Tinian too, there were airplane engines, parts of airplanes. The island's very sparsely populated, still to this day, I would assume. But you can see aircraft that had been shot down.
Oh, I see.
Sitting in these open areas, and you could go down. There were dug-in bunkers. You could get down in the ocean right there. It's not like a beach, and you could dig down in this black sand, and you would find like the butt end of rifle brass that was still in the water, but it was all corroded off or walked off. All you were getting was like the back end of it. I picked up a Japanese grenade can out of one of those things. It's pretty cool. We were actually the first Marines back on Tinian since World War II.
Okay, so there's a lot of old debris.
Oh God, yeah. It's pretty cool once you understand it. They had one bar there; it wouldn't hold but like 20 Marines, but there'd be 100 of them outside the door. Didn't have nearly enough beer for all of us, but pretty cool. Cool stuff. I think people miss out a lot. I think they miss a little bit, from not being in the military.
Sure.
Not saying anybody can. Sure. I'm just saying you're exposed to pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I would bet, especially when you're at that young age. I think you absorb those experiences.
Yeah, and I think it helped me a lot too. Really cool people, and a lot of them I'm still in touch with today, one of my lieutenants, I'm still in touch with him, one of the infantry lieutenants, and boy out of Chattanooga, Jeff Price. Still talking to Jeff, and you just make relationships in there, sure as hell, that you don't never lose them.
And how old were you when you got out?
I was, let's see, I was about 30, 29.
Okay.
29, 30 when I got out.
Got it.
Pretty much immediately went into law enforcement. I wasn't in law enforcement. But I had, during my time, I was with the 6th Marines for my first 4 years. I was about a year and a half in, went to sniper school. I served the rest of the time there at 6th Marines as a scout sniper. Got on the shooting teams. Ended up going to Charleston because and of all things, I swear this is true to this day, man. When you go through sniper school, there's certain things you have to accomplish in order to be what they call mission deployable. One of the things was you had a clearance. You had some advanced call for fire stuff and stuff like that. But the security clearance kind of killed me. You had to have a clearance to work in embassies, consulates, or nuclear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this group of guys I'd got real tight with, and it's called State Platoon, where the snipers are. It's called Strategic Target Acquisition Platoon. And hell, they pulled me out of that just out of the blue. I think we were in Fort Pickens, Virginia, doing some kind of training. Got called to the makeshift company office, and they're like, "Dude, you're going to Charleston, South Carolina." Oh, what the hell's in Charleston? It was a nuclear base there. So I go down there, and you meet people when you're shooting long range. Like you meet people in the teams, the competitive teams. Mm-hmm. So when I got to Charleston, I had a pretty good gig going on down there. I was a sergeant then, and I had to work some duty, but I'd done a lot of training, and ended up had access to way too much ammo, and shot all the time. And me and a couple of guys from there ended up shooting Marine Corps matches in Camp Lejeune. And eventually I got picked up on the rifle and pistol team. So the last couple of years I was in, the Marine Corps has the big team, they call it. It's out of Quantico. They compete all over the world, all over the country. And then the bases have smaller teams, which that big team kind of pulls from. Mm-hmm. So the last 2 years I was stationed at Quantico, shooting on rifle and pistol team, traveling ever. I was on the team that issued, and I say all this stuff humbly, man. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It just happened to fall in my lap. It was just my path when I was in there. But I issued the very first 50 Beretta 92 9mm when the Marine Corps left the 1911 and went to the Beretta 92. Was on the development team up there that picked that particular pistol to transition to, and then issued them up there. I remember my very well rehearsed training. The Marine Corps has field manuals and training manuals, TMs, FMs, TMs. And at Quantico, they're the ones that done all that research and development. Well, my part of that team, so you traveled from Quantico when the season started. We'd fly to Okinawa. We'd teach over there, instruct the matches. We'd leave there, go to Hawaii. We'd teach there. San Diego, teach there, and then from San Diego, go to Camp Lejeune, finish up there. And then all those people that placed in the top 10% come to the Marine Corps Championships at Camp Lejeune. Anyway, we were, my part of that was disassembly, reassembly of the Beretta. And it was first, y'all said, man, these things had just come out of, had just been adapted. So we go through the classroom part of it, and we go to the range, real nice range, probably a 3 foot from where your shooting bench is, concrete, nice overhang, beautiful ranges. About a 4 foot drop down to the grass, and then your targets were, from there on. And they had these little benches, maybe a foot and a half in front of you. That's what your workspace, put your ammo, earmuffs, whatever. And I remember, man, I get in the tower, there's 25 Marines this way, 25 this way, 50 Marines there, another 100 behind them, 50 at a time. And I remember, everybody on the line, pick up your road. We're actually fixing to go through the disassembly, reassembly right there before they even shoot. And I remember, everybody got a pistol, and they do whatever the verbiage was, very well rehearsed, And I said, let's hit that takedown lever. And when they hit that takedown lever, they were holding it like this, kind of pointed down a little bit. They hit that takedown lever. Slides and barrels off those brand new first issued in the Marine Corps Berettas jumped off the slide, and hit the damn concrete down there.
Okay.
That was a flaw in Berettas at the time.
Okay.
You know, cops carried them, but if you knew what you were doing, you could grab the slide and hit the takedown and pull her, slide the barrel off.
Mm-hmm.
It's since been corrected.
Sure.
But I remember that my captain and this first sergeant was standing outside that damn tower looking at me, and I'm like, what are you going to do? And I said, oh, everybody lay those frames on that bench and jump down there and grab them slides and the barrels, kind of thing. Just start over, sir. What the hell you want me to do? There ain't nothing to do at this point. We learned something.
Right.
But it was just so crazy because we rehearsed that shit to look professional,
sure,
in front of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that happens along the way. Right?
Sure.
Shit, I was glad I was part of it.
That sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It's a lot of time, it's just a lot of time away from your family.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, when I got back from my first deployment after Mitch, my oldest was born, hell, he was walking, and my daughter was born. She was born in Naval Hospital, a little bit different situation. I was still traveling a good bit with the Marine Corps at that time, but it is the people you meet, what you learn about yourself. I think that helped me more than anything. I was damn good raw material when I walked in the Marine Corps, I was damn good raw material, but they just redirected it. You know what I'm saying? And kind of show you what you're capable of if you are focused on something positive instead of just, letting it rip kind of thing. And I think
sounds like you were doing a little bit of both.
I was doing a little bit of both, man. I loved it. I loved all of it. I did. It was hard. People think boot camp hard. Boot camp ain't crap, man. You're in Marine Corps infantry. You get out of boot camp and you start training for infantry. You start training for combat. That's tough. That's when it gets, sniper school is the hardest thing I've ever done. Mm-hmm. They had an end doc for that. It was kind of funny, man. There was a captain named Captain Dasher. We were down in Panama training, and we were laying around. I was a radio guy. I was a boot, number one. Whoever's new coming in, somebody's getting rid of the radios, and I was that guy because I was taller, put the antenna higher in the air, so they said. And we were laying around in Panama.
They just wanted you to carry.
We were laying in Panama one night, and I remember Captain Dasher. He's like, Lynch, what do you want to do in the Marine Corps? And I said, sir, I'd like to go to sniper school. He kind of grinned. He said, oh, was that right? And I said, never heard no word about it. Well, about a year later, I got rid of the radio, and I was a fire team leader in a rifle squad, and we were back at Lejeune, and company runner comes and said, hey, Captain Dasher wants to see you. I go to him and report like you're supposed to and all. He goes,
and you know him well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I said, he said, you remember what you told me you wanted to do? I said, yes, sir. He said, you're going to get a chance to go. Got you. And I tell you, this is where I realized, I don't know what I realized. Later down the road, you get to thinking about it, but they had an end doc, and it was a 48-hour end doc. So before you even get a seat in sniper school, which there's 25 in a class, you have to go to this end doc. Your rifle scores, your physicals, all that stuff's already done. Mm-hmm. You just got to make it through this 48 hours. And at the end of that 48 hours, almost exactly, we started about 6 o'clock one afternoon, and 2 days later, we end about that time in the afternoon. I honestly don't remember hardly.
What happened in that 48 hours?
Just real physical. It was physical. It was no sleep. I'm sure there was a little time in there where we get a cat nap or something like that, but you had to demonstrate, land nav skills. You had to, there was some shooting with, to be honest with you, very little shooting. Most of it, they wanted to see if you could, what your call for fire skills were. Could you read a map? Could you direct artillery or stuff like that? It was just a lot of water, And I remember
what do you mean by that? A lot of water?
You just stayed in water all the time.
Okay.
I mean,
you were wet.
You were wet all the freaking time. You were going to, crossing, navigating through the god awfulest swamps in Camp Lejeune. You could, you could imagine. I'll tell you this: one night, I guess it was the first night.
You probably don't remember because your fucking adrenaline was
I'll tell you, man, it was just exhausting. I think after a while, I remember there was this dude. We were in this swamp, about knee-deep water, and light discipline. We were under light discipline. Well, they change out point and navigators. So we had changed out a navigator, point man, or whatever, and we were standing in this water. And this dude right close to me said, what is that in the water? I don't know, man. You can feel it, right? And one of the guys, freaking red, he had red lens flashlights, right? Dude, he turned that damn flashlight on. I bet there was 10,000 freaking snakes, 1.5 feet or so long. They were just completely covering this freaking water. And at that point,
and they were moving around like a.
Oh God, it was something to see, man. And this one dude, he just freaking lost it, man. Just took off, but anyway, as this thing goes on, when it comes to a close the next day, there was probably a little over 50. We probably started with 175, something like that. It was probably 50 that was left. That the last of the Mohicans, I guess you was saying, and there was 25 of us picked out of that. Mm. And there were 6 of us, though. They had us broken in groups of like 25 or 30, something like that. There were 6 of us out of our group. So apparently we jihad somehow together to get each other, through. At the time, I remember thinking, screw y'all, I got a ticket to the show and y'all don't. And then, after a while, it weighs on you. You think about it and you're like, why did I, out of that many men, because these guys are coming from everywhere. I mean, these are all infantry Marines.
From 175 down to 50.
Yeah, 150 down to 25.
Yeah.
And the time we graduated, there were 16 of us graduated out of all that. So you think back on it and you're like, and I ain't talking about like in the next couple of days, everybody back in the unit was excited. There was 2 of us, being a guy named Jake Tafoya that made it through there. We actually ended up doing well in the class. It was just like years later, what is it that separates?
What do you think it is?
I don't think people are tested until, what do they say about strength? They say strength, you don't know how strong you are until strength is the only option you have left. And I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I know that I didn't do it by myself. I know that there was these other guys, there were 6 of them that got picked out of my group, out of however many groups there were. But I think it's learning how to, I don't know. I guess my deal with people is I look back on it and I was just I don't like the term redneck. You know what I'm saying? I need it. Marine Corps was one of the best decisions I ever made. Be no question about that. But how does just a South Arkansas, West Little Rock boy, end up in that environment and make it, or thrive in it? I guess really. I don't know. I think it's just a desire not to, I tell people all the time, I don't know how to lose because I don't know when to quit. And I think there's more left in us. There's more in us than we ever know.
Yeah. It's
just a matter of how you see that, what happens in your life that lets you see exactly, what you're made of. Because see, I don't have any, I'll be honest with you. I don't have much tolerance. And I'm not summing everybody up. I don't know how old y'all are. Don't really matter to me. I don't see generations.
He'll kick your ass right now.
I don't see generations. I see the difference in age or time, and things evolved. I don't think that today's young people, not all of them, again, I'm not summing everybody up.
But you can't put them in a generalization.
You can, and I'll tell you, I think that too many of the young people today, they've never seen what they're capable of. And instead of just accepting this is where I'm at, and what am I going to do? What am I going to do to get by it? What do I have to do to get by it? I don't think they're prepared to do anything, and I don't think that on the most part, young people are really exposed to really true leadership. And you don't have to. I'm not talking about you don't have to be a Marine or a cop.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, just be a good person. That's my deal. We're all born the same. We're all, there may be conception methods that are different than they have been in the past, but we're all born a human, no matter where we're at, no matter what color we are, no matter what religion we are, no matter anything else. That's the example I give you. Look across Arlington National Cemetery. You can't tell you can tell if you look at the tombstone. If you're looking across there, man, you can't tell what religion, sex, none of that. It's just everyday people. So they were tested. I don't know how. Now I will say, man, these athletes, they go through some good leadership stuff.
Sure. I think Bob, talked to a friend of ours, Bob, and I think he summed up what his definition of what good leadership is while he was on the podcast. And he said, what good leadership is basically, I'm going to work my ass off and I expect the exact same from you.
Yeah. And see,
and that's it. And
yeah.
And when you need help, you raise your fucking hand. And when I need help, I'm going to raise my hand. And
yes.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's good leadership.
And that's what my deal is. Doesn't matter how the age difference between me and you or anybody else. You have the ability to do anything anybody else has.
Mm-hmm.
And see, I don't have many excuses for it. I mean, I expect you to apply yourself every day. I expect you to seek perfection. I expect, if you're going to do something, what level of perfection do you expect out of it? What's the results you're looking for? Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes a process to get from where you're at up here, there's a process. You just don't go from here to here. But everybody has the same ability outside of some mental, some natural or some mental defects or physical, handicap, if you will. I don't know if that's an acceptable term now, but outside of that, we're all capable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how do you find out? And, and the last thing I think I want to find out is how strong you are is when, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want to have to figure it out then. I'd like to know a little bit ahead of time, but I don't know how do you I don't know how you get people to, I just don't see the difference in humans. They're all capable if they're exposed to the right people in the right in the right circumstances. That's why I don't care. I don't want to hear any sad stories about being tired or you're hurt and your foot hurts, or I just want you to keep going.
Yeah.
So
you think that the tomato farm or any of that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It absolutely did. And my grandfather, Holt Hobbs, the one that was in the Navy, and my grandfather on my father's side too, good man, worked for Alcoa Aluminum, hard work, all of them hard work, but yeah, you damn right it does. Cause I remember, man, in that South Arkansas home, there was the bedroom I stayed in down there. Although the grandkids actually hated it. I grew up being called Rusty. I'll go to Rusty's room. I wouldn't be there, but that's still Rusty's room, Dude, I remember, wasn't no air conditioning. Wasn't no air conditioning or whatnot. No, it's just the way it was. But, I remember there was a box fan at the foot of the bed. There was one in the window. And later on, I found out.
That was the air conditioner.
That was the air conditioner. You know what I'm saying?
And you woke up and you needed a drink of water.
But you know what? When you lay down, you're laying on top of sheets, but you fell asleep like that.
Because you were tired.
Because you had worked. Expectations were high, but they wasn't unachievable.
Mm-hmm.
Anything, I never was asked anything to do that they didn't think I was capable of doing. So therefore I took it I was capable of doing. They wouldn't ask me to do it. Mm-hmm. To me, it's that simple, it's that simple.
Yeah.
So anyway, I knew I had a good time in the Marine Corps. And I knew when I got out, I knew at that point, like I said, being around that nuclear facility down in Charleston, we were exposed a lot to federal and local and state law enforcement in case there was ever an attempted theft or a theft of a weapon. That's where the law enforcement thing, I knew then. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. I want some structure.
Yeah.
That paramilitary still, I wanted that.
Yeah, you probably needed it.
I couldn't have done anything else. I wouldn't have done anything else. I love law enforcement. It's hard for me to tell you which job was the best, either being a Marine or being a cop. They were both significant. Both significant to me, but I loved it, both of them.
Where did you kind of start out in law enforcement? What were you doing?
Actually, it's kind of messed up because when I got out of the Marine Corps, a colonel I had named Jim Davis, we were as close as an enlisted officer relationship could be at the Marine detachment there in Charleston. And when I got out, I stayed in touch with him, and he offered me a job in Dorchester County, South Carolina, down on the coast, and I had never been there. So my first job, actually, my first assignment, like I said, I come back home, done a yard sale, packed up the family, moved to South Carolina, and I remember it was Narcotics. Because nobody knew me. I wasn't from there. So I grew hair out And
you're going undercover.
There was a lieutenant in and I worked narcotics again later on in my career up in Spartanburg. And I remember when I went to narcotics, that lieutenant told me his name was Dan Johnson, great guy. And Dan said, "All right," he said, "This is different work." But my first job though was narcotics, and I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I want to be back in uniform, and narcotics is a dirty job, man. I've done it later on again too, man. When you got your son telling on ratting out his wife or ratting out his mother, grandparents, when they get caught up and getting themselves, it was a horrible business. Now uniform patrol's tough too, but you dealt with more good people. Everybody in narcotics was horrible. Everybody, your informants and all that stuff it was a lot of work, long hours. Yes, long hours. But that was my first job. And then when I moved from Dorchester, where I started, and went to Spartanburg County, where I ended up doing 27 years there, started out in uniform patrol. And, I said, a big department, you had to make your way in a 350 deputy department,
When you were doing narcotics, let's stay there. When you were doing narcotic stuff, how did you find like almost like shutting your brain off and going back to reality? And when I say reality, I guess really like going back to your family, right? Like, cause you're 8 hours on or 12 hours on or 16, whatever the hell you were. Right. And then all of a sudden now you're dad.
Yeah. Now you're dad.
And now you're dad. Now and now you're, you gotta it's almost like you're living a double life.
You are living a double life. I remember going, it's kind of weird because, you do kind of look a little scruffy and, your hair comes out. People know most people know you're a deputy. I went in narcotics. When I got to Spartanburg, I worked uniform patrol just a year or so.
Because you had to look the part.
You had to be the part. And I remember I had been there, like I said, a year or so, man. And I took this job. It was, if I remember right, it's Martex Fibers. And they had a huge drug problem selling within the company, particularly on their night shift. And Martex Fiber, they made the part of it I went to work for was they made fishing line. And I remember, my hair had got down, about shoulder length and all. And I mean, I literally went through the whole interview process,
like
application. Yeah, like a regular turd, and I went through all that and was working, third shift. I wasn't seeing, started buying crack and cocaine, I've done that 6 months. And it's, when you get done with something like this, it's exhausting. I mean, it's a lot of time. You're working a full-time job.
I
was working, making damn fishing line.
You had a different name?
Yeah. Scott Wren.
Scott Wren.
Yeah. You have these.
And they're paying Scott Wren in a bank account.
Yeah, they're paying. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. They're sending. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Because they don't know.
They were giving me checks, but right. Yeah, they were paying Scott Wren. They didn't know shit. They didn't know shit. It was too late.
So you're getting paid twice?
No,
the money's just going.
Wasn't no double dipping in. Wasn't no double dipping in. But it was, that is a lot of work. And then, there's times, man,
So you're working the night shift?
I was working third shift at Martex Fibers. I was expected to do.
But then you had to go to fucking.
I had to do my reports and stuff. Yep, I've done all that.
Okay.
Yeah, had to do all that. And I remember going to school.
So you're really working. Working 2 shifts every day, basically.
Just about.
Or a shift and a half every day.
I remember being woke up one time at it's embarrassing as it is. It is what it is. So I remember my ex-wife waking me up at a play at elementary school for the kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just, you get on cases too where, we had a lot of cases back in the time when really a lot of drugs were coming in, across the border, and we would, let's say, we caught a guy with 100 pounds, 200 pounds of weed. And when you get a hold of them, man, you try to flip them, you just tell them you got one and only chance. Well, these guys expecting this, these mules are all on a timeline. They know how long it takes to get from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Spartanburg, South Carolina. So there ain't a lot of time to screw off, and those reciprocating agreements like that you make with these prosecutors in other states, you done stuff like that at the time too. It was, you know what I'm saying? So you may leave Spartanburg and you may drive to Virginia to deliver this load of weed, on a controlled delivery,
right?
Kind of controlled delivery thing. So
that you could you could work both angles, and you basically, it's like a win-win.
Just like a win-win. Yeah.
Because they have to deliver by a certain time.
They know if
you
they're
don't want
held
to mess
up.
that up.
That's right. Oh yeah, you can't break that flow. I mean, these things, a lot of them are done on the roll.
Yeah, and they probably know if whatever isn't here by this time, we're done.
That's right. And then you had cases flat out that you would, they snowball. You get a guy with the right stuff, guy, girl, whoever it might be, and and they roll on their source, and then that source rolls on that source, and that source, and you just keep snowballing it to get to the root of the thing. And sometimes it's days, days. I got sick of narcotics, man. My second time in narcotics, I'd done just about 2 years, and I walked in one day and told the lieutenant back there, good dude, man. I told him, I said, I can't do it anymore.
I'm not Scott Wren anymore.
Hey, I ain't doing this no more. And he said, fine. I went in and seen the uniform patrol captain, who they were all laughing at me for doing it to start with. They knew I enjoy being in uniform patrol with those guys. And I remember, man, I left sheriff's office, everything's squared away. I'm going to take 2 or 3 days off and then show up in uniform patrol. I drove straight from the sheriff's office right down to Bolton's barbershop and got my damn, got my hair cut ready for uniform patrol. I was sick of it. It was a horrible business. Narcotics is hard work.
Yeah, it'd be hard to keep your self-esteem up.
I remember several cases where they done what they call reverses. This is really kind of what done me in. I just said, hell, I'm not doing this. But I had a case where there was what they would do. There was cases where you'd have a significant amount of cocaine, let's say, come in, right? And keeping in mind, you can't spend cocaine as a cop, but you can spend money. So what they would do, if you had an informant and they're tight on that drug, on that cocaine, you're not the decision maker. You're the one that works the case. You're the one that gets the search warrant, does all that. But it's somebody over you that decides when you hit this thing. When you you get your search warrant, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. But let's just say they had 30 keys. Let's just say 30 keys. Well, you run and get 30 keys. It looks good all piled up on the table, photographs being taken, but you can't take it to the bank. Mm-hmm. So you'd have decision makers saying, how tight's the informant? They can see whatever they want to anytime they want to. They're with them all the time. Let's see what they got left tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? It was, ounce here, 10 ounces here, 5 ounces, whatever it is. So the smart manager would say, the next day he'd say, he's still got 20 keys left. Let's see what he's got tomorrow. See what he's got later. Mm-hmm. And the optimal time was you get them down to about 6 or 8 keys. They're all going to do the same amount of time. But when you run up into that time, you're not getting 30 kilos of cocaine. You're getting 10 kilos of cocaine, which is more than sufficient. And you're getting a couple $100,000. Does that make sense?
No, I'm not following.
I think I got you. So
they'd let them sell it.
Yeah.
So you're getting the money.
Oh, I got it.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
where I started getting a bitter taste in my mouth was
because I got you.
You see what I'm saying?
Now I do. Yeah. So there's like a ratio of a happy medium of hey, let's let them sell some of this so we can get some money in.
Yeah, get the cash, because now it's that these drug seizures now they're spread. If the sheriff, I think the sheriff's office had a pretty
what
good
were they
case
doing?
here.
But I guess what I don't understand is how are they spending the money? Well, let's just say they got a bunch of money in.
You talking about law enforcement? Yes. Yeah. All goes back into the back into the drug war.
Gotcha.
One way or another.
Yeah.
You just got freaking.
Yeah.
You got cocaine out here. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of stuff that.
Yeah.
Then they had a reverse, which is kind of messed up too. But a reverse was, so you got a guy that's maybe his supplier got popped, and now he's cut off and he can't get his cocaine. So then we got an informant telling us, hey man, he's looking to pick up a key or a couple of keys, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we'll sell it to him. So out of evidence, you get a couple of kilos, whatever it is he's wanting. And then you sell it to him. Now, the only thing about a reverse is you got to make sure it don't go anywhere. So when you make delivery to the guy that's going to pay you for it, you're getting his money, he's getting your drug, but you're taking him down right then.
Yeah.
So then the unfortunate part of that is they know what happened. So they know to get out of trouble, we'll tell them, all right, if you're going to get out of this, you got to do 3 cases that equal 5 ounces or more. Mm-hmm. So then they're on to the reverse gig now. So I remember we had a guy named Johnny Lucas, man, guy out of Georgia. We stung him on a reverse, and the next 3 people we arrested, he was just giving up. All you're doing is getting money.
Yeah.
But I did see where the sheriff's office here had a good case here. I think this last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, got I think one deal they got a couple $100,000 cash off of. Oh, but what I was saying, all this cash now, man, it don't all belong to law enforcement anymore. I mean, you've got now they're out of these seizures. I know South Carolina, I'm sure it's the same out here. Your prosecutor's office gets a cut. Your state agency doing the testing, testing, they all get a cut.
All the people that are part of the process.
Yep. Everybody get it. Of course, it's, is what it is, but there's a lot of cash, a lot of money, a lot of seizures. Seizures are hard. Cash is easy, to get, but it's those kind of things. These guys that do narcotics for a career, and I know many of them, my hat's off to them. Mm-hmm. They live a tough life.
Sounds like a dirty business.
It's a very dirty business. It really is. And you see it and you're part of it. Like I said, I didn't last long. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't stand it.
Yeah, there's so many dynamics in that stuff.
There is, man. And, you got, you got guys that.
There's politics. There's all these layers of people that are involved from somebody who's in the field all the way up to like the guy, the office person who's making a decision on something.
Yeah, I remember a case one time, man. They seized about $3.5 million cash. Guy had these Shelby Mustangs. He had just high end.
You should have found
cars.
Got one of those and put it in the garage.
Yeah. That'd be better off than the cash.
That's
Actually, you should deal with in the cash. But I remember, these are the kind of things too. They get fixed on money, but sometimes those seizures, especially cash, property, any of it, can take years to clear up through court because your seizures in civil litigation, and then the criminal side is the other side. And I remember a case is right at $3.5 million cash, and they were searching this man cave with all these cars in it. And one of the investigators seen something didn't look right. It was OSB board that was screwed to the wall, and the rest of it had been hit with a nail gun.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they get a drill, they pull it off, and there's these just Ziploc gallon bags in there, just full of cash. And, $3.5 million to the tune of $3.5 million. Within a couple of days, this guy, to cut him a deal, they give him $500,000 back. He signs over everything. So the sheriff's office, they get all the cars, ski-doos, everything, and literally put like $500,000 cash in a paper sack, give it to him. Guy gets his $500,000 of untaxed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's the way it works, though, man.
Yeah.
But I'm not sitting here saying anything negative about law enforcement. I'm just simply telling you from the inside out how it works. These things don't operate on sometimes the county or the state budget. All this money they seize in addition to that means something to them.
Yeah.
It means something to them.
Yeah. I when I first got out of college, my first big construction project was for the San Diego FBI. So we built a brand new headquarters for the San Diego FBI, and when you build their facility, you learn a lot about how their facility works, right?
Yep, I'm sure. Yeah.
We had to know how it all worked so we could build it properly. And so we'd be like if we were in an interrogation room like this, and this is about the size of them.
Yeah.
And so we'd be in they call it a secure work environment. And so the room was built, with a certain standard, right? So we had radio frequency film in the walls, right? So you couldn't bug in the room from the outside, okay? Because they were worried about that in their own facility.
Yeah.
So what I think a lot of people don't realize is, people are worried, like if you work for the FBI or CIA they're actually worried about people inside of their own facility that work for their same organization, wiretapping themselves, right? Or interrogating or listening and bugging in on themselves.
Getting information from within.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because we built these rooms, and I'm telling you, man, like like that'll crack up there, right? That would not be allowed, right?
Oh yeah.
And so we spent so much money going back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to like dial these rooms in, everything.
Yeah.
Every single little thing.
Oh yeah, the feds is a whole nother level too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God,
they have access, like they have restricted areas inside the building of like, hey, you're a federal agent for the FBI, but you only get in this much of the building.
Yep.
And then somebody else gets into this, so they can't even walk around the building freely.
Look, man, feds are paranoid. I remember one time, man, I was going to another county. I was in narcotics, and they were we were working a case with the ATF. They'd give us some information about some guy selling a bunch of stolen guns at a flea market in the next county. I didn't know anybody over there, and I remember we got within a couple of miles of the met. We had a meeting place, and we met our agency and whoever else was in state. ATF was there, and I remember what they used to call a KEL unit. Well, a KEL unit was a wire, and back in those days, it was a pager. You know, we all wore pagers, and so that pager was the wire. That was the transmitter. And I remember, man, we pulled up on this little parking lot of this back road.
They would use that thing as an amplifier.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we go out there and they go to wire me, right? And the ATF wire up. But yeah, the feds are different. They're a different breed for sure. Good people. You know, they actually, the FBI in particular, you know, they don't.
There's a couple of bad apples.
There are some bad apples. We're dealing with one. We're dealing with one back. The sheriff, the second sheriff I work for right now, they got you know, a grand jury actually talking to him. You know, or be talking about him on this coming Tuesday. There are some bad apples, but there's, you know, most of them are good. And that's what's bad.
That's my experience.
Yeah, this sheriff right here has gone bad back home. He's gone. He needs to be dealt with, and he will be. But those guys that work at that department, they bear a black eye just like they had done it. You know, I remember early on in my law enforcement career. Do y'all ever remember hearing about an incident in L.A., the Rodney King incident?
I was born in Los Angeles.
Oh, really?
Outside Los Angeles. Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't realize at the time, that was back in the early 90s, if I remember correctly, but that whole thing reflected across the country.
Yeah.
You know, the country, it was actually what those LAPD officers used was called a PR-24. It was a side handle. It was a baton with a side handle. Very, very good tool. You can't even buy them anymore. Within 2 years, they
got rid of them.
Yeah, like the PR-24 just jumped out of the damn guy's ringer and, you know, 20 of them and just beat the hell out of you.
Right.
But yeah, that's the way it works. You know, black eye. We're talking about all this stuff, and I'm not defending any of these cops that are rogue. They need to be they need to be dealt with. But nature of the beast. You know, George Floyd, all those cases.
Yeah, well,
right
I would say just like anything, it's like a most of society. They're all good people, right? Most of society is good people. Now there's always a couple bad apples.
You always got a bad. You know, you do. You got a bad apple, and I think today too, something I've noticed anyway. All these agencies across the country, they're all hurting for manpower. I mean, they can't hire enough people. Unfortunately, they've got themselves in a position. It seems like now they're just kind of hiring anybody that'll get through the process and seeing if it'll work out or not. You know, and my rule is, man, hell, don't do that to them, and don't spend the money that it costs to get a deputy in South Carolina anyway through 6 months of training, 110, 120 grand, you know, the first year in business to take a chance on them. You're all cops, recruit what you know will work, you know, but that's kind of where law enforcement is. It's a real mixed bag of who ends up in law enforcement now. And most of it's just how long can they last.
I think they're just super underappreciated and underpaid. And so, you know, you're getting people that'll deal with that, right? Versus they should be more appreciated and better paid and better respected. And they do a better job.
Yeah.
Right. And you get higher quality people.
And then, you know, you think about it a little bit from this standpoint too. How much do you pay a guy that could go out here and get it out the first 15 minutes of work? You know what I'm saying?
I worked down at the San Diego, Mexico border for 3 years, and I was building a construction project right on the fence. And so I was there, every day, literally for like three years. And I dealt with CBP every single day. I have multiple of their cell phone numbers and would talk to them every day. And most of the people I dealt with were good people, but I would say that the people that were out in the field and standing at the booth right every day checking vehicles, they were stressed.
Oh, God.
They were stressed out. All those people were really stressed out, and it showed.
Yeah.
And it's a super dangerous job.
It is. People, it's just, you never know, what behind, you just don't know. You hope, at least in narcotics anyway. I always said it was a little bit safer. I mean, they're more violent men or women, but you had the intel from your informants that helped you a lot deal with that. It's that uniform patrol side of things where Junior's had his 25th Budweiser and he's
ready to go.
He does. He gets dangerous. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and there's a lot of good tools out here now that they have, to help them deal with that less lethal options. The stun gun, not stun gun, the taser's been freaking phenomenal.
Yeah,
that was a game changer in itself. But what you got is people getting dependent on it instead of still being proficient with operating without it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. They've got dependent on it. It's like any crutch. You have it makes the job easier. You lean on it too much and then one day it breaks.
Right.
So, but it's a different mentality to do with these kids today, young people. I tell people all the time about Big Sky though, and I'm talking about I work, with men and women from 23 to mid 30s, something like that. On the most part, they've been doing it since they got out of school. A lot of college wasn't for them. Some of them got college degrees. And I tell people back home all the time, man, I've met some of the best young people. My generation views younger people different.
Mm-hmm. How do they view it?
Lazy, lazy, not tough, weak, needed, kind of thing. But I tell people all the time, man, I've met some, if I needed to recruit Marines or law enforcement officers, I'd set up an office in Big Sky. They're that good of people. The only problem is you got to get their ass out of Montana.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They love Montana, but I do say there's that caliber
of good people.
Yes. Hell yeah. Yep.
So now let's just jump in today. What are you up to today? You've been here 2 years. What are you doing for work?
Well, now I'm the brand manager there. I'm one of the managers. And what that entails is I work across all the departments, making sure that we're operating under Marriott standards.
Okay.
So my deal is the standards, that'll come. We just need you to work. We just need you to be a good person.
Okay.
We need you to be concerned about the other person on your team, a person on the housekeeping team. We just need all of you to respect each other like that. See, I don't give out where you're from, what color you are, what religion you are, what your sexual preference is. I really don't care. What are you made of? Just be a good person. That's the way I am. So I'm not worried about, I'll tell my boss I ain't worried about the standards.
Yeah, they'll figure them out later.
Yeah, the standards will come. We just got to get some pride in them and make them commit to each other. And that's the only way I know how to do it. I've seen it just happen so many times. But there's a little bit of a difference when you're living with, 50 grown men, half of it in the bottom of a ship where you're stacked 5 high. You learn a lot about a human, going through all that stuff. But that same thing is what makes people successful. I mean, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in the military or law enforcement to have that kind of respect for other humans, to understand you're all trying to accomplish a certain thing. This is what we need you to do. How are we going to get there? It's not by following the standards. It's going to be by working together, understanding that there's something bigger than yourself. And I think that's what military people do. This much bigger than one person.
Yeah.
That's everything is,
right.
Always somebody else involved with something.
I just heard somebody say this recently. Once anyone's out on a battlefield anywhere, you're always fighting for the person next to you.
It's to the part. Listen, I'll promise you this, man. When you're out there, law enforcement, you're in the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, or whatever, they don't do the president is. They don't know that. You're going to get me home. I'm going to get you home. We're all both going to get you. It's all about that person to your left and right. Absolutely, it is. The rest of it don't matter who the president is. I think he ain't there. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta work together and get stuff done.
What got you interested in hospitality?
Morgan, my son in Charleston.
Okay.
He's I said the kid born on 9/11. He, me and his mom, we separated when he was in the 10th grade, and real good kid. Both my boys are Eagle Scouts too. They're both good, great guys. My old one and Morgan. But in downtown Charleston, that's about the job. That's about every job every college kid has got to working is in food and bev or hospitality. And Morgan, he's worked at Charleston Place, which is probably the very top tier hotel in downtown Charleston. They're all nice, but then he was a bartender over at the Bennett, which is probably the number two locally owned place there. And he just used to love it, And when I got talking, just being around him, just being down in Charleston, I'd see him go by and eat or have a few drinks at his bar, stuff. He's up there in places, and he freaking loved it.
Mm-hmm.
He just loved it. So that's kind of what got me looking this way. Before I came out here, and I took a job initially a couple of years ago at a ranch in South Texas to run the hunting operation on a 30,000 acre ranch down there. And when I got down there, the guy was kind of a shyster. He actually was a damn shyster, but it was more dealing with, and I didn't care for it, dealing with high fence.
Okay.
So you go, client would call, say, I'd like to kill an ibex and a rhino.
Right.
I mean, swear to God, you go buy them.
Come on
auction.
down.
Yeah. And then put them in the fence and tell them, hurry up. I just put him in the fence, so he ain't far from the gate, kind of thing. And
that's not hunting.
It's not, man. I didn't like it at all. So I left there and then come back and
rhino.
And Morgan said, my son down there, he said, Dad, he said, I think you like hospitality. I was down there all the time, talk to him about it all the time. So it's, and I've got I like people,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you, man, it's been a lot of good therapy for me to be, back in mainstream society, because law enforcement and military both. Law enforcement is an extremely tight culture, and you really don't have any friends. You don't really have much, many friends outside of that. You don't, you just don't. So it's taken me a while. First off, you miss that. I don't know, I guess you'd say the adrenaline of it. What's next kind of thing, dealing with stuff. Then when you leave it, you miss the people, your deputies that you're around, and you kind of feel like you're out and you just kind of really feel out of your element because you're so protected and you're so in control as a cop. And I don't mean in control in a bad way, but you just got that extremely tight brotherhood with law enforcement. So hospitality's kind of helped me adjust a little bit out of that, being back around good people and not, you don't have to worry about.
Well, it sounds like you've had to like adapt and integrate. And that's been like interesting for you.
Yes. I've had to do it a lot, man. It's really, it was a good chunk to start with. When I retired, I actually retired from the sheriff's office to run for sheriff. Didn't get elected, unsuccessful campaign. And I fell into a job just knowing people. I was an administrator at public school the last I'll say 7 years before I come here. But for when I got out of law enforcement, that's what I'd done for about 7 years, was work through the pandemic and all in public education. So that kind of started easing me back into it, back into society and meeting good people and seeing the struggles that teachers deal with educating these kids. They're heroic, good people, and I had never, so that helped me a little bit kind of swap over from, because it was kind of weird, man. All of a sudden I'm at this big ass sheriff's office and I'm in charge, all the stuff you've done, all the stuff you could do.
It's a change of identity.
Next day, bam, yeah. It's stripped from you. It's done. Yeah. So,
well, it is kind of weird because I would imagine that you're like, shit, I'm not that person anymore, but I am, but I'm not.
But I'm not. I am, but I'm not. And you still like, as weird as it sounds, man, but I've been working, I like the dark better than I do the daylight, to be honest with you. Yeah, man. Yeah. I've learned to love darkness, man. That's your friend,
You definitely just based on that comment right there, you definitely needed the military and law enforcement. Yeah, you would have been in trouble.
That's what we used to call get them off the roost. You get them up. The one thing you can count on, man. And this may sound horrible, but the very best place to catch somebody you've been chasing a while, I should say they got active warrants on
early in the morning.
Well, not just early in the morning. You hate to run up in a person's house on Mother's Day, but you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
They coming to see Mama. Christmas is a good time to grab one.
Sure.
But dark.
When they're coming home.
If it wasn't Mother's Day at Christmas, it was dark. But it was a big conversion, man. Law enforcement was obviously the answer for me coming out of the Marine Corps. I wished I'd stayed in the Marine Corps. My ex, her dad was a colonel in the Air Force. She was an Air Force brat and moved every couple of years. When she met me, she didn't realize people went to school together and graduated high school together. She had no concept of that. So that's kind of why we got out, to let our kids grow up in one place and, establish a kind of relationship with the community and friends like I had. So, but yeah, it was tough leaving law enforcement. Best thing that happened to me when I was in public education, I finally worked it where I got a grant. I got a grant SRO. I was hiring like off-duty deputies to come in and watch the school. And then finally, when I got a full-time SRO there, I was like being a part of the boys a little bit again.
Okay,
You know what I'm saying? But those days are gone. I'm just glad they happened. I've lost a few buddies along the way, and that's the hard part of it. The rest of it, though, man, hell, I'd pay to do it again. I'd start right now. If I could do something real quick, I didn't get out of breath as quick as I do now.
Sure.
But it was good. It was a good line of work, good profession. I'm proud of it. I wouldn't take anything for it. There's a little baggage comes with it, but there's more good now than there. I think you got certain memories you'll have the rest of your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it's it waters down a little bit along the way, and you meet good people. I have enjoyed that with hospitality, other than lazy ones. Lazy anywhere.
Sure.
When you got out of narcotics and you're just on patrol, what's the story you got? Maybe something that just sticks out. Not something terrible or something ugly, but just something that
there was all kind of man. There was we've worked you can remember this now. One of the biggest cases that we had that I remember was it was called Superbike Motorsports. It was a quadruple homicide. And we get there, they went in the back door. They shot the mechanic, shot the shop manager, shot the owner's mother, shot the owner. Thing went unsolved for 15 years, something like that. Well, this guy named Todd Colehep, you can look him up. He's become a famous. But what was kind of crazy about all that, it's just an intense investigation. The families, of course, want some results. And what was ironic about it is that guy was out of Arizona. He had done some time there as a juvenile for rape. He's now a realtor in South Carolina, but he's a registered sex offender for 14 years. That somebody killed him 4 people was walking in the middle of our sheriff's office checking in with a sex offender register.
Hold on. I gotta start putting these pieces together. So the guy who shot those 4 people was a registered sex offender from Arizona. Okay, and then he became a realtor.
Yeah, and a registered sex offender in South Carolina.
Okay, so
in our jurisdiction.
Okay, all right. Now I got that, and he's in your office
every month checking in with his sex offender officer.
Okay.
So the killer of these 4 people.
Holy shit. Okay.
He's right in our office.
How did you guys? Okay, so how did you put all this together? Because obviously somebody was missing it. He
had become a fairly successful realtor, and this guy, this boyfriend girlfriend, realty. So he was hiring people to go clean houses.
Yeah.
So
what's this guy's name?
Todd Colehep. So he gets this boyfriend girlfriend out to a farm he had down in South Spartanburg County. Gets them out there. He has a container, like these storage containers and shipping containers. He kills the boyfriend, locks her in a storage container. He's got a bed and chains and all kind of shit in there. He rapes her for a week or so, kills her, buries her beside him. A couple of weeks, a month later, he kidnaps another boyfriend, girlfriend, kills him right off the bat. And before he kills her, another county was missing this girl and pinged her cell phone, and it came back to this area there at the farm. And one thing led to another. Thank God, deputies from that county and our county got together. They get down to this farm, and they're standing at the gate wondering, where the hell's anybody down here? It's like a tractor shed and some stuff like that. Pretty nice place. And they just hear this faint, help me banging. And they go in and they actually ended up having one of them knew how to fire up a damn torch. Went out there and cut this chain off his container, and there she is. And she told everything that happened. They arrest him, that same day. And then while they had him, they had his ass on that. I mean, they got 3 dead bodies and, a girl that's been raped. Mm-hmm. And during that process, he admitted, I've done the killing. Okay. I've done Superbike,
Did he say why?
Well, he killed them up there because they had made fun of him. So he had bought a motorcycle and didn't know what he was doing, wasn't talking the right language or something. They made him feel like a piece of shit, honestly, belittled him at the motorcycle shop. And he went the hell off. But he had said when he was in Arizona, he was a kid. I said he was a juvenile when he raped this girl. But he said his stepdad and the stepdad's brother, they'd go out in the Arizona desert. Now, this is what he's saying. This is from a serial killer. Now, they've deemed him a serial killer.
Yep.
And they said they'd go out on the border down there and shoot Mexicans like they were shooting coyotes. Mm-hmm. So maybe he did. Maybe he had a taste for blood or whatever. But he's had problems in prison. Matter of fact, one of the families is real good friends of mine. I talk to them on a regular basis. And she was telling me the other day something about him. He got in trouble in prison. I don't forget. He's probably when he got down there, hell, you got these people out here that are fans of these prisoners. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? He was selling autographs and all kind of shit. Did you find him?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
Yeah, he was. And it was kind of bad for me because the year I did run for sheriff was the same year. So like a month and a half, maybe a month and a half before the general election of the year I ran for sheriff, the sheriff I was running against solved this murder. Mm-hmm. That you just have so much stuff. You have just there's a lot of funny stuff. I mean, there's stuff where you get a call to a house and they could reach the cell phone, but they couldn't reach the key to the handcuffs. You know what I'm saying? And you got the boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever in a compromising situation. I'll tell you one of the saddest things about law enforcement, really, and they've done a lot in the last couple of years to overcome this to an extent. Law enforcement is unfortunately the initial trauma intervention in mental health cases. And law enforcement, right. They're learning. There are a lot more training now for them to recognize that and tools to use because law enforcement really over the years had no idea a lot of these cases.
It's becoming a tool that they're learning how to use.
Yes, yeah, and they're coming proficient at it. There's no telling. I mean, law enforcement certainly has no question about it. I mean, not saying any particular person. I'm just saying the nature of the beast. Law enforcement has killed mental patients over the years and probably could have been dealt with a different way.
Sure.
So mental illness is a big deal for me. I still think about mental illness. I really have meant to really come in here and kind of, I say Bozeman or Big Sky. I'd like to do whatever I need to do. I think to work on suicide hotlines. I've seen way too many suicides too. Suicides are real. Seems like a normal method of death. I mean, so many people now commit suicide. So I think that's probably what I need to do is get settled in here really good. And what is it? Big Sky Wellness. Is it Wellness in Big Sky?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a place right there, right past the Conoco on the right-hand side before you get to you turn in where Napa is. Mm-hmm. It's right there. They do a lot of that's the mental health group there in Big Sky. Yeah. But they've made a lot of improvements in a lot of places. Equipment is one. Training, mental health training is a big, it's a big deal. And then, staying on top of, I remember when I first started and you started dealing with incidents, and I mean, primarily, officer involved shootings, when I first started, you didn't say, you just kind of sucked it up and kind of sucked it up and dealt with it, and there was a case we had, we about lost a deputy and did lose a lady that night. That was the first time I think the sheriff, not the sheriff now, but the first sheriff I worked for there, that's the first time you just kind of made it where it was okay to say you needed to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Having the right people to talk to. And they're a lot better in that way too.
Yeah.
I remember I was involved with an incident one time and it just too much had built up on me. And I remember going to the next county over to talk to
Yeah. You had to get away.
You had to get away from there for counseling. Because you go to the county people, they'll put you on the desk or tell you ain't cut out for it or something like that. And that was the kid. And that really, to be honest with you, that probably had been 15, 18 years where law enforcement has opened up more about that, understanding,
right?
That men and women do and see things that the average person don't.
100%.
And
on a regular basis.
On a regular basis. It's called a cumulative. There's PTSD in a couple of different ways. Mm-hmm. Cumulative is one of them.
Right.
You don't have to shoot somebody and get shot.
But I mean, just stress in general, right? Like if you have a bad week and you stack too many bad weeks on top of yourself without PTSD, your decision-making process is not the same.
No. In your life, in your relationships with your family, everything suffers from it,
Mm-hmm.
And the more open you can be about it and talk about it. There was two guys in my life that, one thing I will say about cops, and I'll say this is probably pretty true with all of them. I've dealt with, counselors, a guy named Andy Grew, it was a Secret Service guy that had been through a bad incident. A guy named Eric Skidmore was the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Those are the guys that have been involved with those incidents that you listen to. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to listen to somebody. I'm not going to listen to somebody out of grad school. They're good people. They've got a counseling degree or whatever it is they are. I'm sorry. I just don't see how you can counsel me on.
You mean if they hadn't been through it?
If they hadn't been through it.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, that's what I say. If you hadn't done it, you hadn't, nothing against you.
Right. But
you're just not going to help.
You don't. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. There's something to have the intimate detail.
Yep. A lot of it. And the military, I think the veterans and all are doing good too. By the way, too, I'll tell you, man, since I've been in Montana, the absolute best veterans care I've had anywhere.
Oh, really?
Hell yeah.
That's good to hear.
Good people, man, because it's right here.
Okay.
The federal bill, the VA,
oh, yeah.
It's right here. Best damn people, man. They don't play around. If you need it, they get it. They're nice.
That's good to hear, man.
Yeah, it is. It is phenomenal.
You're surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like this in South Carolina.
Yeah.
I don't hurt for nothing here. If I've got it on my mind, if I need it now, I'm insurance poor now. Don't get me wrong. I've a retired cop out of South Carolina. I've got insurance. But the VA, and 9 times out of 10, the VA would be a bigger hassle than private insurance. But hell no, the people at Big Sky Clinic there are good. And in fact, the VA here lets me get treated there if I need something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've been treated like a king here.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, that's my experience with it. Yeah.
I just looked it up because I thought I heard this when you were talking about the suicide stuff. It says here, Montana has consistently reported one of the highest suicide rates in the United States. 2022, the state had age-adjusted suicide rate of 28.7 per 100,000 people, highest in the nation.
Jeez.
I thought I'd heard something like that when you said that.
When I got here.
Why do you think that is? Because you're new here, so I was a question.
I will tell you right now that I cannot speak for Bozeman, but I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of people that do a lot of drinking and there's a lot of drugs in Big Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you got people running from stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I do think, and I'm not saying this, it's just a cop in me. So just bear with me what I'm fixing to say. I've worked with guys, men and women, that it would take months to track somebody down.
Mm-hmm.
wherever they would be in the United States, if they were worthy of being in the United States. But to me, Montana is a place where I think Montana is a place in Big Sky, let's say sex offenders. There's different levels of sex offenders. So there could be a sex offender in South Carolina that whatever level he is, that may justify whoever is supervising that sex offender there, whatever police officer, be a deputy, city officer, whatever, and they abscond and they leave and they don't show up, they're going to go sign a warrant on them, but they probably maybe not extradite them. Now, I say that, I just use sex offender as a case. I think that places like Big Sky and these places that have these seasonal workers in and out have a lot of people that could, fly under the radar.
Okay.
Here, I do. But as far as
because they're in and out in 3 or 4 months,
they're in and out of here. Yeah. And who the hell knows to look for them in freaking Big Sky, Montana? If they don't come here, they don't establish residence here. They don't get a driver's license here. They don't get a car here. They just come in and do their thing here and they move on to Alaska for the next gig or whatever. But I do think that alcohol and drugs it's always had a bearing on, on suicide rates.
Mm-hmm.
There ain't no question about that. But I do remember when I got here, I met one of the sergeants from Gallatin County in the Ace Hardware there in Big Sky. And we were just talking to him, and I asked him, I said, what's suicide like? And at the time, this was like in November, and I think he told me there had been like 7 suicides from September through mid-November in Big Sky in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, the one thing about mental health, too, it's got such a stigma that goes with mental health. It's hard for people to ask for it, and it's hard for families that recognize that they have somebody that's in a mental health crisis. It's embarrassing with that stigma to go and,
Yeah, if you bring it up the wrong way, then you get somebody's work.
That's how law enforcement ends up being the triage for it. And, 9 times out of 10, South Carolina had a detention order thing. If we found a person that we thought, that family was swearing to listen to what we had, we could detain them for 72 hours to get evaluated, but they're getting evaluated by C+, state doctors at state mental institutions, and states aren't using the money for that's allocated for mental health treatment over the years, and that budget decreases. It shrinks as they don't use it and put funding elsewhere.
Yeah, and then you get defensive too if you feel like people are accusing you. Then you don't even want to try to solve anything because you're on the defense. Naturally so.
Law enforcement, a lot of mental health patients do not get the treatment they need until, unfortunately, the wheel falls off the wagon, so to speak. They went off the deep end. Yeah,
I'm thinking about that right now. I mean, it's like, how many chances do you get at it? And what do I mean by that is if you're in a bad spot, right, and you make the wrong decision, you don't get another chance.
No.
Right? And so what I mean is it might be your first time and it might be your only time. Does that make sense?
Very well. Oh, yeah.
And so the only way that you get a second chance is to make a different decision.
That's right. And are you capable?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you could easily, make the other decision.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's just something that
I'll tell you. About. I'll tell you this. I've seen 3 of these things. We had a girl, mid-20s. We used to work 3 shifts. So basically, second shift, my shift that I primarily worked was, 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 12, 1 o'clock. Whatever you get done. And we would come in. One of my sergeants, they had done the schedule. We call it ride list, the schedule, what districts you're going to be in, and all that. And we used to literally take copies. It wasn't email back then, really. And we had to fax a copy to the communication center. So me and him had walked up there kind of bullshitting.
Like you're telling them where you're going for the day.
Yeah, the schedule, like a work schedule. So I remember we walked into this little room that's about half the size where our front desk was, where the public come in, ask whatever they needed. And I remember walking in, and there was a girl standing there. She was wearing glasses, a white girl. She had a big purse on her left shoulder, and she had her hand in it. And the guy that was on the desk couldn't have been a worst case scenario for him. He had just shot and killed a guy 2 or 3 weeks before that. So as that investigation works through, he was working the desk until it, whatever come out of that. And I remember him saying kind of shitty, he just said, man, what can I help you with? You know, kind of smart. And I looked up at him to say, I was a lieutenant, he was a deputy, to tell him, I got this. Let me talk to her. You know, talk to her like shit.
Just calm down a little
bit. And when he done that, she pulls a pistol out of her pocketbook and she's got it. The deputy was sitting down there that kind of got on her. He hit his knees and got through the side door. And me and a guy named Ronnie Horn was standing there with this woman. And she is, I remember, I'll never forget it, man. The gun's about from me to you. And it ended up being a Charter Arms 38. And I remember looking at that revolver, and at that range, you can see freaking rounds in the chamber. You know what I'm saying? Well, Ronnie had got down on his knees, and he'd actually got his pistol out. And she's sitting there keeping his pistol on me. And you know, if it had been two young deputies, probably would have shot her. You know, anybody could have shot her and done it.
Yeah.
But it was obvious what she was doing. And eventually, I remember just felt helpless, man. I was just kept really pretty much begging her, you know, hey, let's put this down. We can deal with this. This is not a problem. But there was just this look on her face that was just so intense. And once she realized, this went on for, God, it seemed like an eternity, but literally it probably did go on 5 or 6 minutes, which is a long time.
That's a
long time for something like that. And once she understood that, she just backed all the way across the lobby. And when she hit the wall, she went into a corner and stuck the gun in her mouth and killed herself. And I remember how intense. I tell people all the time, that has got to be the strongest human emotion of any.
Mm-hmm.
She had none of it, would have none of it. It just hell bent on that's the way it was going to be.
Yeah.
But she had a history of mental health. She'd had a stepfather that drove her. He was a long haul truck driver, you know, kind of peddling her out at truck stops kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? The girl had lived a
tough life.
Yeah. But 9 times out of 10, we all just need somebody to unload on every once in a while, you know, to talk to.
Yeah, you can't see yourself out of the darkness.
Mm-mm.
Even though it's right around the corner. You know, the light's right around the corner.
It's right there.
It's right there.
Yeah, it is. It truly is. And it doesn't, you know, I felt bad about that girl and another one I've seen like that too, that you didn't have what it took to, as much of a bullshitter and as many things as you've taught people out of doing or talked them into doing, you know what I'm saying? Why can't I do this, you know, one more, you know, but that mental health's a big deal, man, in this country. It really is.
Yeah.
Long suffering over mental health stuff. You know, people just suffer for long periods of time. Some of them never get help.
Yeah. And it's I guess I think it's unnecessary, right? In the sense that like there is light right around the corner. You just got to ask for help and somebody will show it to you.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's any different than cancer. I mean, I don't know what do you heart disease or cancer. Cancer is just a killer. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
What it seems to be easier to deal with than cancer, but yet I don't know. You know what I'm saying? If you're just the right person to intervene in your life, medication or not, I think it's correctable. Mental health, I think you can have functioning.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big deal. I think so too. You know, it's one of the things about these gun laws when you're looking at that, it's 4473, the federal yellow form that you fill out when you buy a firearm,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you answer the mental health question. Well, if you look, that thing's like 4 or 5 pages. So if you, whatever number of question that is, I forget which one it is, but if you look back in the instructions and you read, just think about this, you read what defines if you have to answer the mental health question or not, how you answer it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been deemed mentally defective and you've been involuntarily committed, then you have to answer it.
Yep.
You have to answer it.
Yep.
Yes, you have. However, that said, if you're declined to buy a firearm, so you go to treatment. you got a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever it is. He puts you on medication, and now you're functioning. Okay. Now, if that doctor will do a court order that says you've been cured, okay,
because of the medication,
because of therapy and medication. What psychiatrist would do that? Because if it's like an alcoholic, they stop their medication, they stop their therapy. So you see, there's a lot in there with that kind of, when people start talking about controlling, I do believe it. Now, that sheriff's office I worked at is full of guns, probably still full of guns I took from people that had mental health cases, because I do believe they're not mental. They're a mental health crisis. They're not go. If they can't go to the store and buy a gun, I don't know where else to get one. That's where people that deal with guns. Does that make sense? Yeah. How do you deal with it? Mental health's a big deal in this country. It really is. It is.
Yeah. The tricky thing with it is, even in comparison to cancers, you just can't see it.
You can't see it.
Like a doctor can say, we see this, here's our treatment plan. This mental health is
whole different ballgame.
Yeah. It's not an imaginary thing, but it's just not something that's tangible.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's difficult, man. But there's a ton of it out here. God.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of it you can't see, but I think there's some of it that's right in front of your face that I think people ignore.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can sometimes that somebody's going through something. I had a coworker that shot himself, and it was probably a year or maybe 9 months. 9 months after he quit and went to work for another company. But man, the last 6 or 8 months he worked for us, man, he was in fucking rough shape. And he was just irate. He was just pissed the fuck off all the time.
Yeah.
And he was going through issues with his wife. She was moving out. She was cheating on him. She was pregnant with another man's child.
Oh, wow.
And so he just lost it. And then he went to work for another company, and I think things got worse. But I look back now, and I was young, and I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to deal with that. But fast forward 9 months, I went, well, duh. Like, that was like, fuck. None of us tried to help the guy.
Yeah, you don't know.
Like,
most of you don't know how.
Well, and none of us knew how.
Yeah.
But we knew something was going on with him, and he clearly needed help. And I don't,
didn't know what to do.
The 5 or 6 of us, that worked on that project right there, actually. The 5 or 6 of us that worked with him, it was a small team. I don't think any of us fucking tried to help him.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to tell when, we had a kid, like I told you, both my boys are Eagle Scouts. So that same Boy Scout troop, there was in the same high school, my son graduated. A kid named Brian graduated a year before him. So Morgan, my son, was a junior. He was a senior. Well, Brian got his Eagle Scout and was accepted into the Air Force Academy. He goes out to Colorado. He's in the Air Force Academy. He is home for Christmas. He has got 1 semester left, and he'll graduate the Air Force Academy as an officer. He comes home, good family. They're still friends of ours. What's left of them. It's a shame to see what all that does, to a family. But hell, Brian come home on leave for Christmas from the Air Force Academy, gets a gun, goes down to his Eagle Scout project, which was on a state park bridge we built for a state park, goes in there and kills himself. Kidfish graduated Air Force Academy. Good kid. Altar boy at church, Catholic church, Catholic family, and not a clue, And his mom now, she'll just tell you, she said, I just
don't know.
I had not a,
right.
You got that side of it as well.
Yeah.
Where there's just
I'm
no
not
visible.
Saying you can always see it or,
No, it is bad.
But
I
can tell you, I would like to think now, it's been 10 years or so. I like to think now, if I was in that same situation now with a coworker, I'd be able to identify it, and I'd
be able to do something.
I'd take some action. I don't know that it would be the right action. I don't know that it would solve the problem, but I would take some action because I could identify it now.
Yeah, but you know what? That might be all it needed.
Right, maybe.
Just to say, hey, man, are you okay? Or you seem like you're really, whatever you can come up with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't handle it well at all, and he was not well supported.
Yeah,
at work. We basically ignored
there's that stigma.
We ignored it.
Yeah, it's that stigma, and that's and that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying that's the kind of stuff that eventually kills these people. There's no intervention because people don't know how to intervene, and it is rough. It is hard to figure out what do I do, what do I know about mental illness. Main thing about mental illness, most of the time, I need somebody to talk to, somebody to listen to them, somebody to build some trust with that they'll actually, hopefully, eventually tell the real, core as to what the big issue is, and being able to give guidance to them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what they say is suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
I don't know that's a permanent solution, but it's permanent.
It's permanent. Yeah. It ends it. It ends it, man. I'll never forget the look on that girl's face that there was no stopping that shit. And so.
Yeah, I've heard I don't know the whole quote, so I'd totally butcher it, but there's something about what depression does to you. And it kind of like, it'll trick you. It tricks your brain into thinking like the answer is usually the most.
Well, I think the best one that I've heard is depression is basically when you think there's no options. And it doesn't matter like whether it could be like all kinds of depression. We're talking about suicide here, but when you don't think there's any options, there's always options. You just can't think of them, or you can't see them, or you don't know how to get to them.
Yeah.
But there's options.
Yeah, there's options. There is. That's what it is. It's you see, there's no way out. There's no options.
I have to do this. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Can't do this.
Yeah. No, there are options. Always.
Right.
Always options.
Yeah, maybe it was something like depression is a disease that blinds you of all the possible solutions to the disease. That
would sound right.
Something like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've been there, man. I mean, depression's rough. Here, I had law enforcement, and I was married 35 years. And then, all the Christmas, all your family traditions, your family, what you do, what your family does together. Y'all have got certain things you're expected to be at no matter what. And, after a career in law enforcement and the military, and then, all of a sudden here, you 35 years, been married 35 years, your whole freaking life changes. So there's a lot goes through.
You mean because you
just without your family, all of a sudden, your family as it existed no longer does. And at the same time, I'm leaving law enforcement. At the same time, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you had two things big in your life happen at the same time. Yeah, that's tough.
Kind of perfect storm kind of stuff. I'm not much on. I had back many, many years ago when I was slipping off to another county when I was starting to have some PTSD stuff going on. I learned medication wasn't for me. I'm not a medication person. Maybe I don't give it long enough, but a lot of these, it's kind of crazy too. If you think about it, a lot of these drugs you see on TV that talks about, for depression and all that
You're
stuff.
about to get some depression.
You could feel the tendency to want to kill yourself, commit suicide and other things like that. Oh, hell, that's the last thing I need right now is damn push off the cliff kind of thing, But I do think these if we do nothing else, now in South Carolina, there's every school ID in a public school, this has been in place now 3 or 4 years. There on the back of that ID case, there has to be by law 2 different suicide hotline numbers on the back of every school ID from middle school through high school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know you just like maybe there's not. I don't know what there is for PTSD for law enforcement, but do you know anything about the Warriors and Quiet Waters here?
I've seen the group. I'm not really familiar with them.
Someone just invited me last week, and I went to a lunch they did. I was very impressed with the CEO spoke, and another guy spoke, and he's actually said you come on and do the podcast just to talk more about what they do. But I was very impressed with the program. But it's cool because they get all these guys out here in the fishing, doing anything, I think that's one of the biggest medications.
Oh yeah,
is being out here and
and two, being around. This winter, man, I did put in for a pheasant hunt. It was done out of Big Timber, and got accepted to go. It just something worked out where I couldn't go, but they're taking veterans on these pheasant hunts and different these shoulder season elk hunts and stuff like that. And there is a lot to being around.
Yeah.
Those organizations, and especially when you get there and you see these people. I've got a friend of mine that does one called Hunts of Honor back in South Carolina. And, maybe kids that father was killed in the line of duty or overseas or something like that. But being around other veterans and just being there and seeing these people recognize what you've done. And, no matter what level you participate, everybody in the damn Marine Corps ain't going to be an infantry.
Right.
Everybody in the Army ain't going to be an infantry. Somebody got to be the damn cook, but it all is relative. That's the way that, that's the way that thing operates. You can't operate any other way, but this all value, every job of any branch of the military is just as important as the other, as far as the respect and what you do. You do different things, of course, but it does help.
Yeah. I just saw it because they put it was a great talk that they did, and they just put it on YouTube. I'll send it to you. It was, but Mountain Mule's going to do some stuff with them for some of their events. So I'm excited to work with them.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. God, I can't remember that. What was the name of it?
It's Warriors and Quiet Waters.
I think that's the name of this place that these people were hosting out of Dillon.
Okay.
They do stuff everywhere, but excuse me, there was some rancher out of Dillon that was hosting this particular hunt. Stay in these people's house. I've been around those things, helping with them more than being a recipient of it. But
yeah, they've got a really nice clubhouse. I think somebody donated it with like 10 acres.
Oh shit!
And they've got some smaller ponds there where they'll practice the fly fishing before they take them out. But it seems like very well run and pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, most of them are. Yeah. And a lot of the people involved has got the financial means to make it happen, and that's just something they're wanting to give back. And I was talking to going brainstorming there at the hotel, and that's one of the things coming up in the near future for us. What do we do for veterans here? There's nothing more appreciative than a veteran that's been recognized. No matter how minute it is. They really are very humble people. They on the most part they are. You'll see some comments, but on the most part they're very humble. They're very, I don't know. They're proud, but they're just humble, and
they're quiet.
Look, I'll tell you this right quick. There was a guy named Malden Pearson. He was a magistrate. Wasn't a traffic judge, but next level up, and his name was Malden Pearson. And we used to see him a lot for search warrants or arrest warrants. And he had court. He had a little court. And just a super nice guy. Well, I knew he was in the Marine Corps. The Marines, they know each other. And we used to get a cake. One of us would go get a cake with a Marine Corps emblem on it for Marine Corps birthday, November 10th every year. And we'd go out there in Mr. Malden's courtroom back in his chambers and, have this cake and all. And he finally retired and was getting in bad health. And Miss Wanda, his wife, just super nice person. He was in his late 80s when he finally passed, but I used to stop by his house every once in a while when I was a deputy or lieutenant, and I'd stop by his house and visit with him. And one day, through the communication center, they told me to call. I called and said, hey, Judge Pearson's wife wants you to ask if you can come by. And I went out there, and he was still very coherent. He was talked to you just like we're talking now, but he was getting in bad health. And she said, Mr. Malden here said he's going to show you. He wants to show you something. She says, no, he don't care about seeing that. And I said, no, what is it? And I said, it's some Marine stuff. I said, I want to see some Marine stuff. She comes back with this shoebox. It's a big square shoebox, not a rectangular one. And the very first thing when she set it down, he was like, no, I don't care about all that. And I said, no, let's see it. Let's see what he's got in there. Dude, she opens up this shoebox. And on the very top, I don't know if you've ever seen what a military medal comes in, but if you're just a personal medal, Purple Heart or any medal that military, Army, Marine Corps would have, it's in a blue box. Okay. It's about that wide, dark navy blue, and it's got these gold stripes, United States of America on the front of it. you know what it is when you're looking at it. And that was on top. And he was tearing up. He was already tearing up. Open that damn box. It's a freaking Navy Cross from freaking Hiroshima. Never knew this man 20 years.
You never talked about it.
Nope. Never knew he had a Navy Cross. I mean, that's right under the big boy. You know what I'm saying? But he, 17 years old, Navy Cross recipient, Hiroshima, never knew it. And I've been eating Marine Corps birthday cake in his chambers for 20 years. That's how most of these people are. You know what I'm saying? They really are. They're very, very humble, very glad to be alive.
Right.
You know? Well, y'all about ready to wind it down?
Yeah, I want to ask you a big question because somebody asked me at the last weekend, and I thought it was a great question. What's one thing that's happened to you in your life that's made you? What's a big moment that's happened to you in your life that's made you who you are today?
God, man, I've been so blessed with good moments in my life. I'm gonna tell you what turned me around, man. What made a man out of me was joining the Marine Corps. That single very best decision. Yeah. Even if I was pushed into it, there's the only way I could get my ex-wife to remarry me again, under duress, I guess you would say. But
I was almost going to say to you, you might have already answered it when we had this conversation.
It absolutely was, man. I cannot even imagine my life without it. Cannot even imagine. And I've got 3 good kids too, and that's a whole different ball game though. You know what I'm saying? Just individually, personally, it was Marine Corps. It prepared me for, like I said, I was good raw material, but you work it into something usable, and best damn thing that ever happened to me. And I think most of your service members would probably tell you that.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you very much.
Man. Hey, this has been a lot of fun, man.
Appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, I've had fun with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer.